What's up guys, today's video I am gonna do a detailed review and pick the top 5 best DSLR camera 2022. After doing proper researches, we came to the conclusion that meets the best in terms of overall. Kindly leave a like if you find this helpful, and I'd appreciate if you subscribe to my channel and turn on post notifications if you haven't. We will be also providing affiliates link to purchase from Amazon. Kindly use to for best offers and purchase from anywhere in the world. We'll be back with more videos. Like the T6, the new EOS Rebel T7 is one of the smaller DSLRs on the market. It weighs 1.75 pounds, with a battery and SD card, and measures 5.1 by 3.9 by 3.1 inches. The grip is wrapped in textured rubber for a solid and comfortable handhold. The T7's body is otherwise mostly plastic, but the modest build quality is not surprising given the camera's price. Although the on/off switch and four-way controller keys are stiff, buttons and dials are well marked. External controls provide one-touch access to the most important shooting parameters, such as ISO, white balance, focus and drive modes. In combination with the quick menu, Q button, you'll rarely have to go into the full menu system. But if you do, you'll find that the internal menu is logically arranged in color-coded categories for shooting, playback and setup. There's also a My Menu option for saving and accessing a group of up to 6 of your most used settings. The camera's pop-up flash covers a distance of up to 30 feet, but it's most effective if your subject is within 15 feet. If you need more light, you may want to pick up an external flash. Flash exposure compensation is available for the in-camera and accessory flashes and comes in handy if you need to adjust the exposure. Both the optical viewfinder and the 3-inch LCD are relatively bright and clear, though the display is fixed and lacks a touchscreen. During testing, I didn't miss either feature, but if they're important to you, check out the $800 Canon EOS Rebel T7i kit, which has both features, among other upgrades, and an 18-55mm lens. Canon's EOS Rebel series has long been a favorite of those who want an affordable but capable DSLR. The T7 continues to deliver good image quality for a camera in its class. Under well-lit conditions, the camera consistently produced pleasing results, almost guaranteeing success straight out of the box. The T7 handled high ISO settings more competently than expected, with high ISO and long exposure noise reduction turned off. You'll have to go into the setup menu and select custom functions to access these settings. Noise was well under control, and details were generally kept intact up to ISO 6400, as you can see from the sample images below. Extend the ISO to high, 12800, and image noise and softening become much more noticeable, although photos shot at this ISO should look fine if kept small for online sharing. The Nikon D3500 is a 24-megapixel entry-level DSLR with an APS-C CMOS sensor that is cheaper, lighter, and has a longer battery life than the D3400 that it replaced. It was designed with the new photographer in mind and features a guide mode that will essentially teach you how to shoot in various situations. The D3500's guide mode puts it into an easy-to-use space in the market. This mode makes it easy to tell the camera what kind of scene you are trying to capture and essentially teaches you the basics of photography, such as shutter speed, aperture and exposure compensation along the way. This is a camera that a brand new photographer can pick up and start making decent pictures without a steep learning curve. Face detection AF only works in live view mode, where the rear screen is used to frame up your photo, instead of the viewfinder, and although it reacts quickly in sunny conditions, indoors it got laggy, seemed to have trouble keeping up. There is no touchscreen functionality on the 921K LCD screen, which can be a little frustrating if you're used to shooting mirrorless or with a phone. Another unfamiliar, but minor, annoyance could be that the optical viewfinder only covers 95% of the frame. It's pretty standard for an entry-level DSLR like this, but means it's hard to precisely judge what is and isn't in the edges of your photo. The camera's image quality is beautiful on the low end of the ISO range and just fine up to about ISO 6400. As far as features go, the specs for the D5600 are pretty much identical to those of the D5500. Resolution remains the same at a decent 24.2 MP, with the APS-C sized CMOS sensor again shunning an optical low-pass filter in the quest to pull out even more detail from the data recorded. The D5600 also uses the same XPET-4 image processor, with a native sensitivity range running from ISO 100 to 25600, meaning it should be quite comfortable shooting in a range of lighting conditions. The optical viewfinder provides coverage of 95% of the frame, pretty standard on an entry-level DSLR, So for some key shots you may want to double check the composition on the rear display to ensure that nothing unwanted has crept into the extreme edges of the frame. Speaking of the display, there's the same 3.2-inch vari-angle touchscreen display with a 1,037,000 dot resolution, although its operation has been improved. It now offers the frame advance bar we've seen on both the D5 and D500 to speed up toggling through images, as well as a crop function for use during playback. While 4K video is pretty much a standard specification in 2021, when the D5600 was introduced it was often reserved for more premium offerings. As such, you won't find it here, with Nikon sticking to 1080p capture. You get a choice of 60p, 50p, 30p, 25p and 24p frame rates, so unless you're a hardened filmmaker, there's probably plenty here to be going on with. You can even use a dedicated microphone if you wish, with a dedicated 2.5mm port on the side of the camera. The EOS 90D has an unashamedly meaty feel. We're constantly being told how mirrorless cameras are lighter, smaller and more comfortable to carry around than a DSLR, but the Canon counteracts that with its own qualities. The EOS 90D is thick and chunky, but with plenty of space for plenty of controls. Its smoothly contoured profiles and grippy textured surfaces give your hands and fingers more surface area and leverage. Paradoxically, this larger and heavier camera is more comfortable to carry around one-handed than many mirrorless cameras half its size. Canon has been designing DSLR controls for a long time, and it shows. The twin dial setup has a narrow knurled wheel on the top of the grip and a second dial on the back of the camera around the 4-way D-pad. Both work well. 4 buttons in front of the top LCD panel control the AF mode, drive mode, ISO and metering pattern, while another button the other side of the top control dial adjusts the AF area. There's another AF area button on the back, alongside buttons for A/AF lock and an AF on function. Canon has added a joystick controller from its higher-end DSLR models, and the back of the camera also has menu and info buttons, a Q menu button, a combined still/movie live view lever, playback and trash buttons and a control lock lever to prevent accidental changes. That's a lot of buttons, and yet the EOS 90D still doesn't feel crowded. The rear touchscreen is fully articulating with a side pivot, so that does mean the screen is off to the side of the camera for angled shots and not on the optical axis, but it gives a lot more flexibility for vertical shooting. The touch responsiveness is very good, and if you enable to the touch shutter mode there's almost no delay between tapping the screen and the camera focusing and firing the shutter. Everything about the EOS 90D's operation feels honed to perfection. The Nikon D850 is Nikon's latest high-resolution full-frame DSLR, boasting a 46MP backside illuminated CMOS sensor. But, in a fairly radical departure for the series, it is also one of the company's fastest-shooting DSLRs. This combination of properties should significantly widen the camera's appeal to high-end enthusiasts as well as a broad range of professional photographers. The use of a backside illuminated BSI sensor means that the light-collecting elements of the sensor are closer to the surface of the chip. This should not only increase the efficiency of the sensor, improving low-light performance, but should also be expected to make the pixels near the edges of the sensor better able to accept light approaching with high angles of incidence, improving peripheral image quality. The D850 has gained a more usable electronic front curtain shutter option, EFCS, which can now be used quiet shutter modes, as well as live view and mirror up mode. To get the full benefit, though, you need to turn on exposure delay, which has had 2 sub-second delay settings added. However, exposure delay persists across all shooting modes. Thankfully, and presumably thanks to a redesigned shutter and mirror mechanism, mirror/shutter shock doesn't seem to be much of an issue, even without engaging EFCS. The D850 has no anti-aliasing filter, which should allow for slightly finer detail capture but with added risk of moire, if any of your lenses are sharp enough to out-resolve a 45.7MP full-frame sensor. There's still no sign of the clever design Nikon patented, so, unlike the Pentax K1 or Sony RX1 or 2, you can't engage an anti-aliasing effect if you do find false color appearing in densely patterned areas. The D850's 45 megapixels allow it to compete directly with the higher pixel counts of the Canon EOS 5DSR, Fujifilm GFX 50S and Pentax 645Z. In the very finest detail you can see a difference, with the Nikon not able to correctly render the fine waves in the banknote. It's starting to show texture on the faces of the playing cards.